All right. So we are in chapter 3, and we were discussing at length last week Chachma, seminal wisdom, Bina, understanding, really getting into the concept of using our minds to, in the long road of Tanya, what we're doing now, create an emotion for God, a love, a fear, an awe. The enormous point is the power that we have, that God gave in our mind to access our soul. And this is a tremendous innovation of Tanya, that until Tanya, people were scared of the mind because the mind is cold. There's nothing as cold as a mind. A mind is full of ego. True. A mind is like the antithesis of life. True. But the mind is also the key to the soul. When we use the mind, understanding its limits, understanding its dangers, but when we fill the mind with godliness, as we're doing right now, of course, in this class, then we take that mind that can be so cold and we fill it with life, with the real life, the only real life, which is godliness. Godliness is life. The opposite of godliness is death. The mind can be cold. The mind can be ego. The mind can be cynical. The mind can be analytical. When you take that mind and you immerse it in godliness, the nullification to God in godliness, the purity of godliness, the life of godliness utilizes the mind as a tool. It's not the ruler. It's a tool to really access and pull out the powers of our soul. And this might sound very like theoretical and remote. The bottom line, we're doing this. Bottom line, we're learning godliness and we're changing. And I'm very confident that every one of us that's on this class is on this class because they see the change. Otherwise, you got other things to do Tuesday night. But you're learning and then you're changing. Maybe changing means you're more sensitized to God. You feel more a love. You feel more his presence. You feel more how everything is him. Maybe you feel calmer. Maybe you feel more the significance, the preciousness of service. But what that means is the godliness that you put your mind into helped evoke what's in your soul, creating and uncovering your feelings for God, which in each one of us could go in a different direction, right? Maybe for one person, it's more feeling the love, and another person, it's more feeling the preciousness of a commandment. But it's all coming from using my mind, immersing it in Hasidic thought, and then seeing that I change. That's in essence what we're saying here. And we all are living it because we all keep coming back to the class and there's a reason. So now we're going to learn inside exactly in a, so to speak, technical way, the 3 topics we're supposed to think about. Now, I am telling you in a technical way because I'm giving you permission to think about anything. Any godly thought, you're good. Any thought of Hasidus, you're even better, right? So all of Torah is God's wisdom. Put your mind in any part of Torah, it's good. It's going to help pull out your soul. Put your mind in Hasidic thought, it's going to pull out your soul a lot more, as explained in a famous talk of the Rebbe that's entitled Inyana Shel Torah HaChasidus, on the essence of Hasidus, translated years ago into English, where the Rebbe explains that really all Torah is this intense light of God, but all other layers besides Hasidus got into a certain box, a certain constriction that muffles their light, that makes it not as naturally accessible. The lights are there, but it's harder to touch, it's harder to be affected by, it's harder to reach. And Hasidus is the only part of Torah that doesn't get in the box. The light's the light. And when we immerse ourselves in Hasidus, when we learn Hasidus, we naturally change because of that light. So therefore, you can learn any part of Torah and more and more and more access your soul, but especially learning Hasidus, because then it's like straight. It's like a straight connection. You don't have to get past the layers, the boxes, those things which disguise the God in the Torah. And Hasidus, God's not in disguise. He's there. He's straight. So we get it straight and we're affected by it straight. But specifically within Hasidus, the Rebbe here is giving us 3 concepts, which of course are really, I'm going to explain each one in a few minutes, and you can spend years explaining each one, but we'll just give the thumbnail sketch of how it's in a working way used in Hasidic lexicon, and thinking these thoughts enable us to contemplate God and evoke, create our emotional response. You can think any thought you've ever learned in Hasidus, immerse your mind in that thought, and you'll be able to achieve this as well. Definitely, it's good to think what the Alter Rebbe is saying, but I just want to give this permission because truly all of Hasidus, as we immerse our mind in it, we access our soul, create in the long road, and uncover in the short road our emotions for God, which then help make us people that really feel God, people that really care about God, people that are really living their life for God, and people that really appreciate the preciousness and significance of everything and anything they can do to serve God. So what are the 3 topics in our curriculum? So looking inside, we're on the 2nd page of chapter 3, 5 lines from the top, the middle of the line, 3 words before the end. Because the intellect of the intellectual soul, that slice of soul of neshama, which is the intellect aspect of the soul, when it contemplates and delves intensely in the greatness of God. So we're focusing on the overarching theme is God's greatness. And that's why I'm saying anything you learn in Hasidic thought is going to bring you to God's greatness. Specifically, we're discussing here God's working in creation, 3 levels. 1, how God fills all the worlds. 2, how God encompasses all the worlds. 3, and everything of existence is as nothing to God. So we are going to focus on these 3 topics, and we're going to delve, immerse, completely let our mind be subsumed with these ideas to evoke an emotion. So before I explain the ideas, let me just explain the technique, which I just said. To create an emotion, or for that matter, to uncover, but to create an emotion, which is what we're discussing here, it's not like I learn and acquire knowledge, and that's going to create the emotion. That will not create the emotion. Many people know many facts about God and have no emotional response whatsoever. That is not what the Alter Rebbe is saying. The process here is not acquiring knowledge. The process is immersing yourself in the knowledge. So that's why, in a sense, it's almost better to take a very simple idea that you don't have to think about, that you know very, very, very well, and immerse your mind in what you know, as if you're learning something, you thought about it, you grasped it, you acquired it, you know it, and now you just sink your mind into it. You just fill your brain with that thought. In the lexicon of Hasidus, we call this hispoinenus, contemplation, which means your mind is absolutely full of this thought. Now, we're the ultimate ADD generation. And if we weren't, these devices of ours have definitely made us. We are so used to like stimuli, neon colors, flashing lights, music, everything. So it's hard for us to stay focused on one concept. I'm saying we could have been ADD before we got phones, And the younger generation, oh my gosh, it'd be really challenging to teach those children that are raised from birth with devices, because it's really hard to focus. We need to focus. Focus means clearing your brain, and the only thing in it is this godly thought, this godly reality. And that's why I'm saying it's almost best to have a simple piece of godliness for starters, for beginners, for newbies like us. A simple thought that you're not using your mind to understand, you're just holding it in your mind. And that's all that's in your mind. And to really hold one thought in your mind and nothing else, if you do it for 60 seconds to start with, that's pretty impressive. Then you could try to build up to 70 and to 80 and to 90. It's very hard for us. Again, our world makes it hard for us. It's like the opposite of our world. Our world is fast. This is slow. Our world is impatient. Here you have a lot of time. Our world is like this and this and this. And here's like, no, just this one thought. Don't move from this thought. And as you're holding that thought in your mind, you're opening up your soul. Now, if that sounds overwhelming, something else that I just see so many places, it's really directly affects your soul, obviously, is the very study of Tanya, what we do here. And additionally, learning Hasidic discourses. A Hasidic discourse, what's called in Hebrew a mimer, that has a special power to reach our soul, which means even if you don't do what I just said, and you're learning the Tanya, you're learning the Hasidic discourse, your mind is affected by the godliness. The godliness changes you. Even if you don't do the official things I just told you of official contemplation in Hebrew, hispaininos, and you just learn it and understand it and process it and contain it as a piece of knowledge, it will affect you. The light in Tanya and the light in the Hasidic discourses is such an intense light that it illuminates our brain and enables us to access our soul. So that's like the giving you a cheater's road, That was written, but what I know works. Learn the Tanya, learn Hasidic discourses. The light will affect your brain. The light will reach your soul. And you'll see that you start looking at the world more and more through a godly prism. That becomes more and more natural. That becomes more and more how you look at life, through godly eyes. How much more so doing what we're recommending here in this chapter, which is really contemplating. Again, contemplating doesn't mean learn. Contemplating is after you learned. Holding in your brain the thought, and that is the only thing in your mind. For however long you can do that. And then time yourself. And then push a little more, a little more, a little more. And the goal, again, is this total immersion of mind in the most godly thing we have, thoughts of God, Hasidic thought, that directly opens up the soul. So what are the three topics, now that we know the technique? The first one we said is Mimale Kol Almin. Mimale Kol Almin means how God fills the world. Fills the world is God's most constricted venue of creation. Sovev Kol Almin is how God surrounds the world. Surrounds the world is a much more powerful energy of God in creation. Surround does not mean literally surround. It's not like there's an item, like a pencil. And Mimale is within the molecules of this pencil, and Sovev is around the pencil. No, this pencil within every molecule is Sovev and Mimale. But we use the word Sovev to connote a distance, because Sovev relates to what it creates at a distance. And then there's Kula Kaima Kilo Chashiv. The third, again, we're going higher and higher. The third topic, the Rebbe said, which means it's all nothing to God. It's all nothing to God. We're nothing to God. A level of God's reality where all of creation is meaningless because he's so beyond it. So let's start now from the top to work it this way. So God, in his first essence and being, is all, takes up all. There is nothing but him. And then he has this desire for a Jew. He desires us. He has a vision of a Jew, a vision of a piece of himself as a Jew, serving, connecting, being one with God. And for love of that vision, God creates. So the initial space of creation is this primordial constriction called Tzimtzum Harishon, where God squashes himself to make a space of less intense God energy. And within that little space, called Kabbalistically the halal, the void, but it's not a void, it's God energy, it's just less intense, creation is going to take place. And then there's many, many levels. So initially, in the beginning of this creative experience, God is so high and remote from what will be, it's like what will be is almost like irrelevant. Though it's not irrelevant at all, because it's his whole purpose. in his essence and being. But when he moves from his essence and being to the steps of creation, this first reality post Simsum Harishon, this first reality post the initial primordial constriction, is so beyond creation. It's like, huh? I need Jews to do mitzvahs. I don't want a Jew to do an avera, a commandment, a transgression. What's a commandment? What's a transgression? Those things are so small, so minuscule. It's like they're irrelevant. But deeper than this level of irrelevant, they're very, very relevant. Because in God's essence and being, we're so relevant that he's going through this entire process of creation to get to us. When we go way, way, way down from all these levels of God beyond any concept of world and stricture, we get to levels of creation where there's a concept of a format, a structure, a world where there's 10 energies. First, it's 10 energies in one, and then it becomes 10 separate energies. And then it becomes the 10 energies as we're familiar with them in the 4 worlds within the evolution of spiritual realities to ultimately get to our physical reality. Because we're the point and purpose. And all the spiritual stuff, if you follow it or not, is to get to us. Once we're talking about the dynamics of creation, there are 2 major techniques that God uses. Now, of course, for those of you that have learned with me the entire 53 chapters of Tanya, you say, what do you mean 2? There's this, there's this, there's this. True. I'm saying overarching. We're talking about very broad concepts. So overarching, we have 2 different energies. The higher one, Soivev, and the more minimized one, Mimale. Soivev and Mimale are within every aspect of creation. Soivev, which is a much more powerful, less constrained force of God, is that which makes something exist. Mimale, which is a more constricted energy of God, takes that, I'm calling it raw existence, and fashions it into the specific existence of that item. Meaning, is this an angel? Is this a spiritual reality? Is this my pencil? So if you take my pencil and you take Malach Gabriel, one of the highest angels, and my pencil, they both have the exact same Soivev energy. Soivev is this shall be. This highest angel shall be, this pencil shall be. No differentiation. Soivev makes no difference between the highest angel and a pencil. But the Mimale is very different. Because the Mimale is going to be as per the ability of this creation to absorb. So obviously the Mimale of this, one of the highest angels, is far more luminous, brighter, more powerful, less constricted than the Mimale in a piece of inanimate pencil. And that's basically the difference between Soivev and Mimale. Soivev is the same on every level of creation, and Mimale on each level of creation is as per the constraints, the limits of that level to absorb. We have Kula Kaima Kilo Chashiv, beyond all of this, where like there are verses that say, and if you are righteous, and if you're not. Or it says in Malachi, Yaakov and Esav are brothers. Like, what difference does it make? But then the verse continues, but I love Yaakov and I hate Esav. I thought Kula Kaima Kilo Chashiv, it's all irrelevant. On the level of Kula Kaima Kilo Chashiv, it's all irrelevant. But then there's something higher than Kula Kaima Kilo Chashiv, God's essence and being. At the level of God's essence and being, he makes a choice. And the choice is Yaakov. The choice is the Jew. The choice is the mitzvah. But Kula Kaima Kilo Chashiv, beyond everything. Soivev, the matter of being of creation, same on every single level. Mimale, very constricted God energy that changes on each level of creation and that fashions and fine-tunes whatever that raw energy is into exactly that creation. So when a person is thinking about these ideas and he immerses his mind in these ideas and he doesn't let anything else get in his mind but these ideas, he's opening up to create feelings from his soul. Feelings from his soul can now be created that he as a human being can feel emotions for God. If it's like I don't think these would be the topics I would think of. That's okay. And if it's like, I'm not going to be contemplating, I cannot for 60 seconds hold an idea in my brain, that's also okay. Because I've truly seen, again, maybe when the Alter Rebbe wrote this, it wasn't okay. And maybe some 200 years ago when this was written, you needed these topics and you needed to contemplate. But the world is a different place now. And as the Rebbe's been telling us since like 1990, 91, the energy of Mashiach is already in the world. The Rebbe literally said, and it's in a personally edited by the Rebbe talk, all the energy of Mashiach, all the spiritualities in the world. What? And like this? This isn't the Mashiach we've been davening for. Not as it's reflected in a physical reality, but in a spiritual reality, the energy of Mashiach is here, which is very significant in terms of our spiritual accomplishments, of our spiritual abilities. So we perhaps doing easier work than was needed some 200 years ago, we can accomplish the same things and we can even accomplish more. Maybe, I'm saying maybe, I don't remember. If I lived then, I don't remember. Maybe in the times of the Alter Rebbe, you really needed to do the whole deal contemplation. And maybe specifically in these topics, though really in all that Tanya is teaching you for sure, because you could view everything under these themes to open up your soul and create these feelings. And maybe now, because there's so much spiritual energy in the world, enormous spiritual energy. There's enormous impurity in the world. Everything's balanced. There's enormous spiritual energy in the world. We can do something far less, so to speak, just learning the Tanya, learning the Hasidic discourses, and it could really, really affect our minds in very, very deep ways. So someone just asked or said that sometimes it's not sure if something's godly or not, and that's a very good point. That's a very deep point. And definitely to achieve this goal, the safest thing is to think about something from learning, like an idea from Tanya, an idea from a Hasidic discourse, literally a thought of learning, because then you know you're safe. Because definitely if we get it out of that like very clear, defined Torah of Hasidus, and we go into a more amorphous thinking, feeling state, you're right. You're right. And it could not be clear. And if we're already doing this, we want it to be clear. So therefore, the best thing to think about is something directly from learning, directly from a mimer, directly from Tanya, pure Hasidic thought. Notice I'm not saying a sicha, because a sicha is not necessarily Hasidus. That's what I'm saying. A mimer, a Hasidic discourse, or Tanya, pure Hasidus, immerse your mind in that, even a very simple idea of that, even a very short idea of that, and it should achieve these results. Any other questions? Any other thoughts on this?
I have a question. So how is it that a sicha is not a Hasidic discourse?
That's a great question. A sicha could be completely nigla. Could be 100% nigla, could be 99% nigla, could be 90% nigla. A sicha does not mean it's Hasidus. A sicha means it's something the Rebbe said. A sicha means a talk of the Rebbe. So the Rebbe could, and does, have many talks in which he's analyzing Talmud, Halacha, Rambam, Maimonides. He doesn't have to bring any Hasidus in there. Very often when the Rebbe analyzes Rashi, the Rebbe will, sometimes for 95% of the talk, analyze it from a completely called nigla, revealed level of Torah. And at the end, he'll bring in what's called Yena Shel Torah, the wine of Torah, the Hasidic dimension. And sometimes that Hasidic dimension is 2 paragraphs. And sometimes that Hasidic dimension is 4 pages. It depends on the talk. But a sicha means a talk of the Rebbe. Is everything the Rebbe says by definition Hasidus because the Rebbe is saying it? No. There's levels of Torah. There's pshat, there's remez, there's drush, there's slate. There's levels of Torah. The Rebbe can speak and does on all the levels of Torah. But a mimer is Hasidus. A mimer is pure Hasidus. It's not any other levels of the Torah. It's Hasidus straight. So that's why I'm saying when you put your mind in a mimer, in a Hasidic discourse, or you put your mind in Tanya, both of those areas, pure, 100%, nothing else but Hasidic thought. So these are the straightest ways to unlock your soul. And ideally, doing what the Rebbe is asking of contemplation. And nowadays, I see it. I'm not just saying it like I believe it or I want to give people, comfort. I see it. It works. Just learning the concepts, I'm sure because there's so much energy in the world now, triggers our soul to respond very, very strong. Anyone else? Any other questions? Those both were really good. Okay. So now we're going into explaining the 4 foundational emotions. Now, just like those 3 thoughts, are very broad thoughts. Yes, I made them sound very small. They're not very small. I'm just giving the basic working definition of them. They're broad thoughts, which many other details can fall within those broad umbrellas of thoughts. So similarly now, we're going to speak of, in very broad terms, the 4 emotions that we work on in our relationship with God. 4 emotions? I mean, learn through Tanya. There's so many levels of love in Tanya. True. But everything we learn and that we don't learn is going to fall under one of these 4 categories. So we have overarching 2 levels of love and 2 levels of fear. And we're going to discuss now the most basic thoughts we think to create these 4 levels of emotion. Now, when we're looking at it in a practical working reality, generally, or traditionally, the simplest emotion to access is a basic fear of God. As humans are wired, we have a basic fear of God. Now, nowadays, we're not so in touch with fear. And as I think we discussed maybe last class or 2 weeks ago, even the term fear doesn't feel good to us. But there's a sort of human fear of God. That's a very good feeling. It's a very positive feeling. It's not a negative feeling. I think the problem is fear has a very bad rap because fear, like anything else, could be utilized in inappropriate ways. Fear could become aggression. Fear could evoke a feeling of vulnerability. Here we're talking about fear of God. Fear of God is a very safe, holy space. It's an awareness of God's power. And that awareness should affect me, that I feel like, wow, I need to serve him. Now, it used to be that people were so in sync with this fear of God, like it took like nothing, like striking a match and boom, it would come out. Nowadays, as I said, for a lot of us, it might be like a very foreign way to go because we don't think of fear. But if we get past those layers, we all should be able to find, like, they say, no atheist in a foxhole, a basic human fear of God. So that's like the lowest of the 4 emotions because it's the most natural. Lowest meaning it's the easiest one to access. Higher than a basic fear of God is a basic love of God. Now, the reason why that's higher is because for all times until today, love was more difficult to access than fear. Love was more unnatural to feel a love for God. Maybe nowadays it's different, and maybe some people automatically and naturally, they're born with such love and they feel such love for God and they have to work more to get fear. I'm saying when we're making this hierarchy, it's based on normal people in normal times. I don't know if we're in normal times. So traditionally, your most natural feeling was fear of God. You're just taking your fear of God. And that was like a very easy shift. And then you worked on yourself and you felt more naturally in love of God, higher on the totem pole because you had to work more for it. If you look at yourself and you say, love of God, I don't have to work on love of God. I feel such love of God, but fear of God, that's a little further from me. Fine. So you have naturally love, work on fear. You could say, I feel both. Great. That's wonderful. You could say, I don't feel either. So traditionally, we'd say start by working on fear because that's easier. But if you start working on fear and for you it's not easier, it's okay. Work on love. Because even though we're wired in a way that fear is more natural, but our society has inculcated us that we feel safer in love than in fear. And that's why I'm saying the traditional ladder of a basic fear and then ascending to a basic love, maybe for some people today, it's easier a basic love and then they ascend to a basic fear. The basic fear is gvura, God's strength, God's power, God's might. Love is chesed, God showering on us all of his goodness. Now, hopefully, especially for you, those of you that have been in this class for a while, and many of you have been in this class for a while, so I sincerely hope that both the natural fear and the natural love, you're like, yeah, I'm good. I know what she's talking about. I got it. Because that's a basic goal and outcome of studying Tanya, studying Hasidus. Hasidus should make God real to you. You can say, real? I mean, we all believe in God. I believed in God before I studied Tanya. Yeah, but more remotely. Of course, you believe. You're not saying there is no God, there is no creator. You know there's a God. But to know him, to have that connectivity to him, we gain that from studying Hasidus, as we're saying. Famous story, I'm sure you all know, or many of you know, I'm sure I've said it many times in the class, happened with the founder of Chabad, the author of the Tanya, the Alter Rebbe, also happened with his, in later, not at the point of the story, his Mechutin, Reb Levi Yitzchak Berdichev. Both of them had father-in-laws that very opposed the Hasidic movement. Both of them went off and studied for a long time by the Maggid of Mezrich. Both of them came back, and their father-in-law said, "What? What did you do this for? Went to that cult." And so the Alter Rebbe said, "Now I know there's a God." I said, "Now you know there's a God? This might call the smallest, youngest, most insignificant scullery maid. Do you know there's a God?" Like horrified, like, of course I know there's a God. For this, you went to Mezrich? The Alter Rebbe and Reb Levi Yitzchak replied, "She says, I know." Now, to understand the story even more deeply, know in the Hasidic lexicon, as we're going to learn at the end of this chapter, isn't an intellectual concept. It's connecting to the intellect. It's connectivity. So when a chassid, when the Alter Rebbe or Levi Yitzchak Berdichev says, "I know, I possess da'as," knowledge, that means I'm one with this. Obviously, the Alter Rebbe knew there was a God before he went to Mezrich. He was on a very, very, very high spiritual level before he learned Hasidus. But now I have a different connectivity. I'm putting it in my very simple words. I'm saying for us, not for the Alter Rebbe, but for us, now God is real. The more you learn Hasidus, the more God is real. We're taking a term, a word, and we're fleshing it out and fleshing it out and fleshing it out, that it's real to you. Just as if you could envision, God forbid, someone who, I don't know, was abandoned at birth. They know the term mother, they know the term father, but those terms have no feeling for them. They don't evoke anything. Or maybe not abandoned at birth. Maybe that's not the perfect metaphor, but maybe more they have a mother and father, but very detached, very remote, there in a very, very peripheral way. So they know what mother means, they know what father means, but they don't know it at all because there's no emotional connection. So it's almost, for so many people, God could be, of course they know what God is, but there's such remoteness, there's no emotional resonance at all. As you learn Hasidus and more Hasidus and more Hasidus, learning the Tanya, learning my Mara, learning the Tanya, learning the discourses, you have that das, you have the connectivity, you have that emotional response. And the emotional response should be, again, when I'm thinking of anything that's God's power, a natural fear, which translates into being a God-fearing person who serves God meticulously. And that's great. That's wonderful. That's what we want. We're supposed to be God-fearing. God-fearing is a tremendous virtue in Jewish thought. Jews are naturally God-fearing. That's how we're supposed to be, that we have a sense of God's power, and it propels me to serve him. At the same time, it's not enough just to have fear, as we'll much later discuss. Fear and love are the wings. You need two wings to fly. As strong as is my fear of God, needs to be my love of God. And my love of God is coming from such an awareness, such a reality of God's kindness. Feeling God's kindness, that should drench me, should saturate me. And I've said many times in class, the idea of having a notebook, a thank you God journal, writing in it every day, writing in it, writing in it, writing in it. So your muscle is so strong. Everywhere you look, you see God's kindness. So which is supposed to be stronger, my fear or my love? They're both supposed to be absolutely strong. It's not like it's on the ladder, so fear and then love, so your love should be stronger than your fear. They both should be absolutely strong, and you need both of them. And as we'll discuss in the next chapter, how each one of them affect us in terms of serving God. But fear, I'm thinking of God's power. Love, I'm thinking of God's kindness, how God's good to me. So if it's natural for you to think of how good God is to you, that means probably your love is very strong. And if it's a little more remote to think of God's power, then maybe you need to think about that more to feel the fear. And if it's natural, like you look at yourself and you figure it out. And if I don't feel that much fear, think more of God's power. And if I don't feel that much love, think more of God's specific goodness to you every single day. And if you can't think of anything good God is doing for you, your muscle's just very out of shape. Work on it, focus, demand from yourself every single day, and you will feel this deep, like a reservoir of love open up, saturate you, flood you, that when you think of God, you will naturally feel so much love. Everything I said, I hope, is very clear, but I said two things, and I said there were four. I said there's four emotions, but we've spoken about two. So the two we've been speaking until now are the basic fear and basic love. Basic fear, God's strength, God's power. I don't feel it, focus on it more. Basic love, God's goodness to me, God's love for me. Don't feel it, focus on it more. And then I have two higher emotions, a higher love and an even higher awe of God. In the higher love, as we're going to discuss here, now again, as I said, these are four broad topics for many, many, many sublevels. So I'm going to say them in the most broadest terms, and there might be other nuances within any of these topics that are slightly different because they're four broad topics for many, many, many emotions. But beyond the basic fear, God's power, basic love, God's love for me, God's goodness and kindness, the higher love would really be feeling God's goodness, but God's so far from me. Far from me, perhaps because of my sins. Far from me because I'm a human being in a physical world. Far from me because we don't yet have the complete revelation of Mashiach. Far from me because there's klipa, there's evil in the world. Again, each one of these would evoke a slightly different feeling, but that's a higher love. It's a love that's a thirst for God. He's so good, but he's so far. And even higher than this would be this enormous, absolute awe, which expresses itself in a complete nullification of self to God's energy. And on that level, I'm feeling God's power. And I'm feeling he's right here. I feel all the power of God, but he's right here. Total nullification. So basically what we're saying is we're looking at God's strength and can create from there two different dimensions of fear and awe. God's goodness and can create two different dimensions of basic love and higher love. If I'm thinking, and again, we're making this, I just want to repeat again, super simplified, because obviously we can't now spend the next 10 hours going into levels and levels and levels and nuances and nuances and nuances. We want to understand the basic concepts, and then we're going to do the work. If I'm thinking of God's power, but he's far, powerful, but far, out there in the seventh heaven, so to speak, I feel fear. I feel what we would say yira, an intellectual fear in my brain. Yiras, fear of God's awness, God's power. But if I'm feeling God's power and he's so close, he's right here because everything is him and there is nothing but him, I'm nullified in the presence of God. And that's this higher awe, which could be called a fear that's an embarrassment. Like you're embarrassed in the presence of God, so to speak. You're so nullified in God's presence, which until now in the chapter, we sort of use the term pachad for, this emotional. So we'd say the lower one we could view as yira, the higher one we could view as pachad. The lower one is the power of God safely distant from me. And the higher one is the power of God right here. And again, with love, feeling God's goodness and relationship to me is love. Feeling God's goodness and distance from me, again, because of transgressions, because I'm a physical being, because of the world, because of powers of evil, because we don't yet have the complete revelation of Mashiach, I'm thirsty for God. All four of these emotions are very powerful in helping me be a true servant of God. Meaning, as we've said countless times, Tanya is not theology. Tanya is not philosophy. Tanya is you're a Jew who wants to serve. How do you serve? By really loving and really feeling a fear, awe of God. Because if I'm full of my love of God, I so want to give him. I so want to be with him. If I'm full of my fear of God, I so want to not transgress. If I'm sensing God's power and presence right here, I'm so nullified. All I want to do is express God energy. So the more these emotions are intense, the more natural is my service of God. And it becomes easier. The more you have these feelings, the easier it is to serve. So if a person could say, no, I have such love for God, but it never inspires me to do anything, we're like, no, there's some disconnect here. That's not true. That's not how it works. If you really feel the love, you really want to give, and you really want to connect, and you really want to do the mitzvah. And if you really feel a fear, you really keep from any transgression. So the person has what they think of as a love and fear of God, but it's not translating into service. And the question is, let's analyze that love and fear. And maybe it's not fear of God. Maybe something else going on. Because of the love and fear of God, you fulfill that emotion by serving. The only way you satisfy that emotion is by serving. And if you don't serve, you're just like walking around with all this intensity. And it's like, you've got to put it in something. What do you put that intensity in? You put it in a mitzvah. You put it in service.